October 28th, 2025. The courtyard of the Akasaka Palace in Tokyo. Japan's new Prime Minister has prepared a welcome gift for her most important guest. It's not a sword, not a bonsai, not a piece of 1,000-year-old calligraphy. It's a Ford F-150, parked right in the middle of the palace grounds. When Donald Trump sees it, he grins. That's a hot truck. Japan's government is considering buying about 100 of them. Officially, to inspect roads and dams. Unofficially, everyone knows what this really is. A peace offering. Because for half a century, one question has poisoned the relationship between the two biggest car nations on Earth. Why are there almost no American cars in Japan? The F-150 is the best-selling vehicle in the United States, and has been for over 40 years. American cars sell on every continent. But in Japan, a country that buys 4.5 million new vehicles every year, American brands hold less than 1/3 of the market. Ford gave up entirely. In 2016, it packed up and left the country. And here's the strange part. It's not tariffs. Japan charges 0 import duty on foreign cars. 0. It has since 1978. And it's not that Japanese drivers reject imports. Mercedes has been the best-selling foreign brand here for 11 years straight. BMW, Mini, Volkswagen, all doing fine. Ferrari has outsold Hyundai here. So why not Detroit? The answer has 3 components. This is a story about a piece of paper you need before you're even allowed to buy a car. About salesmen who show up at your door with gifts. About a trade war fought over 13 Lexus models. And about a US president who threw up on the Prime Minister of Japan. Let's say you live in Tokyo, and you want to buy a car. Before you're allowed to register it, you need a document called a shako shomei, a parking space certificate. You have to prove, to the police, that you have somewhere to put your car. And not just any somewhere. The space has to be within 2 kilometers of your home. It has to actually fit your car. And the police can come out and measure it. Car sticks out over the line? No certificate. No certificate, no registration. No registration, no car. This isn't some dusty formality, it's the law. And it exists for a simple reason. Japan ran out of space a long time ago. Most of the country is mountains, so its 120 million people squeeze onto the plains, and in its cities, many residential streets are less than 4 meters wide. That's narrower than 2 F-150s parked side by side. So Japan built cars to match. This is a K car. By law, it can be no longer than 3.4 meters, no wider than 1.48, with an engine no bigger than 660 cubic centimeters, roughly the displacement of a large motorcycle. In return, K owners pay lower taxes, lower insurance, and in some rural areas they're even exempt from the parking certificate. And K cars are not a niche. They're roughly 40% of every new car sold in Japan. For most of the past decade, the best-selling vehicle in the entire country, all vehicles, not just minicars, was this, the Honda N-Box. A tall, cheerful box you could fit in the bed of a pickup truck. Now let's do the math on that pickup truck. An F-150 is over 5 meters long and about 2 meters wide, before the mirrors. On an American highway, that's a bestseller. On a Tokyo street, it's a cork in a bottle. It doesn't fit the road, it doesn't fit the parking space. Which means, across much of urban Japan, it doesn't get the piece of paper. Which means you couldn't legally put it on the road, even if you wanted to. But Japan has a second filter, and this one doesn't care how big your car is. It's called shaken, a mandatory, government-regulated inspection. Every new car gets its first one after 3 years. After that, every 2 years, for as long as the car lives. And it is not cheap. Depending on the vehicle, shaken routinely costs the equivalent of $700 to $1,400. Sometimes far more. Fail it, and every repair comes out of your pocket before your car is street legal again. Think about what that does to a buyer's head. Every worn part, every hard-to-source component becomes a bill with a deadline. Reliability isn't a preference in Japan. It's a religion. And a brand with a thin service network and imported parts is a religion nobody wants to join. So that's it, right? American cars are just too big for Japan. Case closed. Well, not quite. Because a Mercedes S-Class is barely smaller than a Cadillac. A BMW X5 needs a parking certificate too. German cars face the same narrow streets, the same parking police, the same brutal inspections. And Germany sells over 150,000 cars a year in Japan, more than 10 times all American brands combined. So size can't be the whole story. Excellent question. Number 2. The salesman at your door. In America, buying a car goes something like this. You drive to a dealership the size of an airfield. You haggle with a stranger for 2 hours. You drive home. And you hope you never see that man again. In Japan, the dealership comes to you. A salesperson visits your home. They bring seasonal gifts. They remember your children's names. When your shaken is due, they collect the car from your driveway, leave you a loaner, and bring yours back inspected, washed, paperwork done. And when it's finally time for a new car, you don't shop around. You call the person who has been taking care of you for 15 years. In Japan, a car isn't a transaction. It's a relationship. And relationships need infrastructure. Toyota has close to 5,000 sales outlets across Japan. There is effectively no town without one. Now compare. When Ford left in 2016, it had around 50 dealers in the entire country. If something broke, the nearest service centre could be hours away, and the parts, weeks. And remember shaken? Every one of those weeks costs money. In Japan, buying a car nobody nearby can fix isn't adventurous. It's financially irresponsible. No dealers, no trust. No trust, no sales. No sales, no reason to build dealers. A perfect death spiral. And here's the part almost nobody remembers. America had already solved this problem 100 years ago. In the 1920s and 30s, Ford and General Motors didn't just export to Japan. They built factories there. Yokohama, Osaka. For a stretch of the pre-war years, most new cars on Japanese roads were American. And this company, Yanase, founded in 1915, grew into the country's premier dealer selling Buicks and Cadillacs to Japan's elite. Today, Yanase is still Japan's most prestigious import dealer. It's where you go to buy a Mercedes. Because piece by piece, America let all of it go. Nationalist laws pushed the factories out in the 30s. Then the war. Then the oil shocks when Detroit's thirsty V8s met $4 gasoline. Then the long retreat to the home market. By the time the dust settled, the showrooms that once sold Cadillacs were selling Mercedes and Volkswagens. America didn't lose the network, it abandoned it. The Germans did the opposite. They built right-hand drive versions for a country that drives on the left. They sent small cars, the Golf, the Mini, the A-Class, cars that fit down a 4-metre street and passed a parking inspector. They invested in dealers for decades, quarter after profitless quarter, and waited. Detroit, meanwhile, mostly shipped left-hand drive V8s across the Pacific and complained that the market was rigged. Which, to be fair, is exactly what almost everyone in America believed. And in the 1990s, that belief brought the two biggest economies on Earth to the edge of a trade war. But hold on. Dealer networks can be built. BMW built one from nothing. So why didn't Detroit even try? To answer that, we have to go back to a very bad dinner. Number 3. The Ghosts of 1995. January 8th, 1992, Tokyo. The President of the United States, George H.W. Bush, is on a state visit, and this trip has exactly one theme: cars. He has brought the CEOs of General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler with him, the heads of the Big Three, flown in on Air Force One to demand access to the Japanese market. At the official state dinner, in front of the cameras, the exhausted president turns pale. He vomits into the lap of Japan's Prime Minister and faints. The trip that was supposed to project American strength becomes a global metaphor. Japanese television replays it for weeks. The language even gains a new verb, bushusuru, to do a bush. It's hard to overstate how hot this fight was. Through the 1980s, Japanese cars had flooded America, small, cheap, reliable. Everything Detroit wasn't building. Plants closed. Congressmen smashed Toyotas with sledgehammers on camera. Washington strong-armed Japan into voluntary export limits. And in Washington's telling, the imbalance had a villain. Japan's closed market. Hidden barriers. A fortress. By 1995, America was done asking. In May of that year, the Clinton administration announced the harshest trade sanctions it had ever aimed at Japan. 100% tariffs on 13 Japanese luxury models. Every Lexus LS 400, every Infiniti Q45, every Acura Legend. Their prices would double overnight, nearly $6 billion worth of cars. Lexus dealers across America prepared for extinction. For 6 weeks, the world's two largest economies stood at the edge of a trade war over automobiles. Then, on June 28, 1995, hours before the tariffs took effect, negotiators in Geneva struck a deal. Japan promised effort, more outlets willing to sell American cars, more American parts. Notably, no binding numbers. Both sides declared victory anyway. And then something strange happened. Nothing. American car sales in Japan barely moved. The fortress was officially open, and Japanese customers still didn't buy. Because the fortress was never really the point. Here's the uncomfortable truth. To ordinary Japanese buyers, American cars had an image problem no treaty could touch. There's even a word for them, amesha. And by the 90s, amesha meant huge, thirsty, unreliable. It meant a steering wheel on the wrong side, because for decades Detroit couldn't be bothered to build right-hand drive versions. It meant the black Cadillac in every Yakuza movie, the gangster's car. Decades later, a Japanese prime minister would explain it to Parliament in a single sentence. American cars, he said, lack understanding for road conditions and housing situations. Translation? You never built a car for us. Now, is that entirely fair? Wasn't Japan at least a little protectionist? Let's be honest here, because this story is usually told as one or the other. Japan absolutely protected its market once, in the 50s and 60s, with quotas and tariffs, while its own car industry grew up. But those walls came down. The import tariff has been zero since 1978. Japan even created a simplified fast-track approval for low-volume importers, a shortcut used almost entirely by foreign brands. And economists who study this keep landing on the same verdict. The barrier isn't at the border, it's in the product. And the strongest evidence for that is the one American brand that actually listened. But, you might be wondering, if Japan is such a fortress for American cars, how did one American badge quietly become a hit here? Excellent question. This is the best-selling American vehicle in Japan. It's not a Mustang, it's not a Corvette, it's a Jeep. Around 9,500 Jeeps found Japanese buyers in 2024, more than 80% of all American car sales in the country. Which sounds absurd until you look at what Jeep did. It built right-hand drive Wranglers at the factory. It expanded its dealer network year after year. And it aimed its marketing at Japan's outdoor boom, camping, surfing, escaping the city, selling the Wrangler not as transportation, but as a lifestyle object, something you park outside the tent. In other words, Jeep did what McDonald's does with its menu, what every successful global brand eventually learns to do: standardize the product, localize everything else. It works. It has always worked. Detroit just never wanted to hear it. And while Detroit wasn't listening, the game changed again. Tesla never built a traditional dealer network in Japan at all. It sells direct, online. And in 2025 it crossed 10,000 annual sales there for the first time, cracking the system by simply ignoring it. Meanwhile, BYD, China's electric giant, unveiled something no Western automaker ever dared to build: a K-car. A tiny 3.4-metre electric box designed purely for Japan, aimed straight at the 40% of the market Detroit always pretended didn't exist. The next chapter of this story might not be America versus Japan at all. Which brings us back to the courtyard. The trade deal is signed. 15% tariffs. A promise that cars certified in America can now be sold in Japan without additional testing. The 100 F-150s are earmarked for inspecting roads and dams, and critics in Japan are calling it what it looks like: theatre. Some of those trucks will spend their lives on roads they barely fit. Maybe they'll be driven. Maybe they'll just be parked somewhere visible whenever a certain guest is in town. Because after 70 years, the lesson of this story is simple. You can cut every tariff to zero. You can harmonize every safety standard. You can park a pickup truck in front of a palace. But a market was never a wall you knock down. It's a culture, a parking certificate, an inspection bill, a salesman at your door with a seasonal gift. And culture doesn't fit in a shipping container. Detroit doesn't need Japan to open its doors. It needs to build a car that fits through them, like it or not.